The Sabbath was a key practice in the life of Jesus, but is it still relevant for us today? Let's talk about it on 3-Minute Theology. Sabbath comes from a Hebrew word meaning to cease or to rest, and we can trace its origin all the way back to Genesis, where God created for 6 days and rested on the seventh, which is why traditionally in Jewish culture the Sabbath is celebrated on Saturday, more specifically from sundown Friday night to sundown Saturday night. Sabbath later gained more importance for the Jewish people, and Jesus clarified its purpose in response to some religious leaders who had embraced a legalistic, almost burdensome view of the Sabbath. Jesus said in Mark chapter 2 that the Sabbath was made for people. People weren't made for the Sabbath. In other words, the Sabbath is meant to be a blessing, not a burden. So if God gave the Sabbath as a blessing to humanity, is it still relevant? I think it is in a few ways. When we look at the life of Jesus, he didn't just rest one day a week. He lived a life of rest, living out of a place of peace instead of stress. So Sabbath is not just a day to rest, it's a way of life. But I also think it's a helpful spiritual discipline to incorporate into our lives. Our culture is busier than ever, and taking a day of rest to stop working can seem counterproductive, and I get it. But really, all the practices of Jesus are radical in our modern age. And I would argue that if we look at rising emotional unhealth, there's a problem with the pace we live at. Maybe a radical lifestyle of rest is exactly what we need. So, what does the Sabbath look like? Well, traditionally, it's a period of 24 hours set aside to rest and worship God. But if you're just beginning, start small with a few hours. Some people do this on Saturday. Some do this as part of their Sunday, starting with church. For others, maybe a day during the week is more practical. The day isn't as important as the consistent rhythm. There are some activities that usually make up a Sabbath, but remember, the Sabbath is not a list of do's and don'ts, so these aren't meant to be things you must do. The essentials are to rest, cease from our regular work, and spend time with God and people we love. So here's a list of things you might do on the Sabbath. Eating an unhurried meal with family and friends, singing and worshiping with your community like you would in church, going for a walk, taking a nap, reading, spending time alone with God, expressing gratitude, praying with and for your family. The list can be adapted to meet your stage of life or personality. But listen, part of the process of Sabbath is learning to distinguish between recreation and restoration. The goal isn't necessarily to binge watch your favorite show all day or scroll social media. We're really looking for activities that restore our soul and connect us to God. My family and I started this practice a few years ago. We begin with breakfast on Saturday and all go around the table and share about our week, what we're grateful for, what we're worried about, what challenged us that week, and what we're hoping for. Then we pray and enjoy the day together with our phones down. But we're growing in this practice. We don't always get it right, and we're navigating separating recreation from restoration too. But spiritual practices are just that, practices. We're all on a journey, and cultivating a lifestyle of rest is key, and part of that is establishing a rhythm of it. So start small and enjoy the gift that it is to take a day to remind ourselves that we don't carry the weight of the world on our shoulders, and that God can handle it just fine if we take a break once a week. Until next time.